Imagine a world where the fate of global trade hangs in the balance, and the clock is ticking down to a deadline that could make or break the economy. This is the reality we're facing with the US and China, two of the world's largest economies, as they navigate a complex web of tariffs and trade agreements. But here's the latest development. The US and China have just extended their tariff truce deadline for another 3 months, a move that could potentially pave the way for a summit between President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping later this year. This extension is a significant step forward, as it prevents the looming midnight deadline from triggering a major escalation in tariffs, which would have dealt a devastating blow to trade between the two nations. The U.S. will maintain its standard tariff rate on Chinese goods at 30%, while China will keep its rate on American goods at 10%. But what does this mean for the future of global trade, and how will it impact the economy? To understand the implications, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The trade war between the U.S. and China has been ongoing for years, with both sides imposing tariffs and counter-tariffs on each other's goods. The situation has been further complicated by the U.S. announcing trade agreements with other countries, such as South Korea and Japan, while also levying steep tariffs on nations like India. For example, Trump has threatened to raise U.S. tariffs to 50% on Indian exports to the U.S. later in August, due to India's continued purchases of Russian oil. This has created a complex and unpredictable trade landscape, with many businesses and consumers left wondering what the future holds. According to David Meal, the head of Eurasia Group's China division and a former diplomat, the extension of the tariff truce is a positive development that stabilizes the situation and increases confidence for American consumers and businesses. Meal believes that the next steps will involve more meetings between trade and economic officials, laying the groundwork for an eventual face-to-face meeting between President Trump and President Xi, which could lead to a more concrete trade agreement. But here's where it gets controversial. The negotiations between the U.S. and China have been complex and included several issues, ranging from American concerns about Chinese overproduction and purchases of Russian oil, to Chinese complaints about Washington's decision to limit exports of semiconductors that China needs to power AI systems. The American priority for these negotiations will be to lower its trade deficit with China, secure and diversify its supply chains away from reliance on China, and ensure the stable flow of rare earth minerals from China. China, on the other hand, is looking for stability in its relationship with the U.S. as it faces a slower growing economy and seeks a more predictable environment for its businesses. Nicholas Lardy, a non-resident fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, adds that a final U.S.-China trade deal may include easing of technology restrictions, and a less likely possibility might be Chinese promises to invest in U.S. manufacturing. However, Lardy also notes that even if both sides make progress and reach a deal, bilateral trade would likely shrink considerably, beyond what we have already seen. But trade tensions between the U.S. and China have already had a significant impact on trade between the two nations, with China's exports to the U.S. falling year over year for the 4th month in a row, and China's imports from the U.S. falling by 10.3% from the January to July period. As we move forward, it's essential to consider the potential implications of this trade deal on the global economy. Will the extension of the tariff truce deadline lead to a more stable and predictable trade environment, or will it simply delay the inevitable? And what about the potential consequences for other countries, such as India, which are caught in the crossfire of the U.S.-China trade war? These are just a few of the questions that we'll be exploring in the coming months, and we want to hear from you. Do you think the extension of the tariff truce deadline? Share your thoughts in the comments below.